Discovering Alabama is a production of the Alabama Museum of Natural History.
We don't want to wake anybody. Hi, I'm Doug Phillips, and this is Alligator Mississippiensis. But don't let the name fool you. These living dinosaurs are quite at home right here in Alabama.
Alligator mississippiensis is more commonly known as the American alligator. These giant reptiles inhabit the wild and stir equal parts fascination and fear. There's another strong emotion, though, that we can associate with the alligator: inspiration.
Back in the mid-1980s, we visited the Mobile-Tensaw Delta, and we didn't find that many gators. Today, well, you can see.
The Mobile-Tensaw Delta is one of those uniquely special places in Alabama and on planet Earth. Back in the 80s, though, many of us were concerned that the Delta might not be around for our children to enjoy in the 21st century. Today, the Delta is a living, thriving testament to what can be achieved through collaborative efforts for the cause of conservation.
Join me for a return to the Mobile-Tensaw Delta. We'll explore the wild wonder of this magical place, and we'll see how Alabamians came together to protect their natural heritage. And we'll visit with some of the Delta inhabitants up close.
This program is about a land unknown to many people, a land that in many ways has maintained its native natural wonders, a place of bountiful backcountry, forests, streams, and wildlife more diverse than can be found in much of the inhabited world. Come along with me as we explore the wild wonders of this land. Come along as we discover Alabama.
Welcome to Discovering Alabama, and welcome to the Mobile-Tensaw Delta.
Cypress swamps, Tupelo Bay hammocks, sloughs, marshes, bogs, savannas, bottomlands, bayous.
The grand Mobile-Tensaw Delta features such a diversity of natural habitats that it's hard to capture in a single word. But perhaps there's one term that will do: wildlands.
The Mobile-Tensaw Delta is the United States' second largest river delta and is recognized worldwide for its unique place in the world's ecology. The delta channels the fresh waters of the Mobile River Basin as they seek the salty waters of Mobile Bay and the Gulf of Mexico. As these waters of many rivers converge, they help create what the National Natural Landmarks Program has long recognized as one of the most important wetlands in the nation.
One of the first episodes of Discovering Alabama took place here in the Delta. Since that time, we find ourselves coming back again and again. Like fresh Alabama waters seeking the sea, we flow back to the Delta to explore wetlands, forests, wildlife, to explore this truly special part of Alabama's natural heritage.
This wonderful wetland cleanses river waters as they flow to the sea. It acts as a buffer against the salt waters reaching the inlands. But there is far more than pragmatic wetland value here in the Mobile-Tensaw Delta. This is a world of recreational abundance, of scientific significance, of educational opportunity, a world of spiritual renewal.
As powerful a testimony as the Delta is to the wild wonders of our state, it also stands witness to the power of the people of Alabama. Today, more than 100,000 acres of the Delta are set aside to remain forever wild.
The Delta is probably the most unique project in the Forever Wild program, and not just because of its size, but the Mobile-Tensaw Delta is, I think many people would agree, it's one of our most significant natural landscapes in Alabama. In 1999, the Kimberly-Clark Corporation announced that they were going to sell 47,000 acres in the Delta, and that really changed everything, not just for the Delta, but for Forever Wild, because that was the first large nomination to the Forever Wild program. And until then, Forever Wild had never bought more than 3,000 acres at a time. And I think it gave people the vision that Forever Wild really could do more. The Nature Conservancy gave $1 million of cold hard cash. The Wildlife Federation bought and held one of the properties while Forever Wild rallied its money. Ducks Unlimited donated money for one of the later acquisitions, and it was leveraged with a National Wetlands grant. The Coastal Land Trust donated the value of one of the properties they sold to the Forever Wild program. The Weeks Bay Foundation later sold a property that had been donated to them in the Delta. Since 1999, Forever Wild and the Lands Division have gone back and bought additional properties and filled in some of the gaps. So it's been a really tremendous story.
Like the Mobile-Tensaw Delta, Alabama's Forever Wild program is unique in the nation. Board members meet regularly to entertain input from the public about new acquisitions. The Delta remains a top priority.
Every time we have an opportunity to get another chunk of the Delta, we do. It's very important that we preserve our river corridors, and that is an emphasis today with Forever Wild. We're also trying to preserve large chunks.
The real effort is to create these biologically viable tracts by buying contiguous tracts, creating corridors where ecological significance is magnified.
Thanks to the protection the Delta now enjoys, we can explore the mysteries that so intrigued the great naturalist William Bartram.
Before the first timbermen carried the axe into the Delta, William Bartram wrote of a district of swamp or lowland, the richest I ever saw, or perhaps anywhere to be seen. As for the trees, I shall forbear to describe them, because it would appear incredible. Let it suffice to mention that the cypress, ash, sycamore, poplar, sweet gum, and others are by far the tallest, straightest, and every way the most enormous that I have seen or heard of. These words were penned in 1775 during Bartram's travels through what would become southwest Alabama. In the 21st century, it's only natural that the Bartram Trail Conference would hold an annual meeting in the Mobile-Tensaw Delta. Here, conference participants can reach out and touch the same native plants that Bartram himself identified more than 225 years ago.
Recognize it is that it's got this white bloom on the underside of the leaf. That separates it from red bay and from devilwood.
As the Delta inspired the great naturalist, so it has inspired generations since.
What was it like growing up out here? It was great growing up out here. We hunted and fished and ran through the woods and did all the things that country kids do. Everybody took his living directly or indirectly from the Mobile-Tensaw Delta, as we called it, the swamp. You either went in there and got something for food, or you went in there and cut down a tree and managed to get it in the water and transport it to Mobile for sale, or you put up a little grocery store and lived off the earnings of those who did go into the swamp to do it. But we were oriented directly to the swamp. It was a good way of life.
Today, there are new ways to enjoy the good life in the Mobile-Tensaw Delta. The Alabama Department of Conservation and Natural Resources manages a total of more than 107,000 acres as public land within the Delta. Fishing, hunting, bird watching will lead many of us into the wild. Others will succumb to the allure of the Bartram Canoe Trail for a very personal visit with the flora and fauna that make this such a special place. The Bartram Canoe Trail is one of the longest canoe trail systems in the country, with routes and facilities for day floats or for extended day expeditions.
A paddler can just go out and they can either visit the website and print a map or get our brochure and follow one of our designated trails, or they can kind of make their own route in the Delta. So they can do some day paddling. If they want to have a bigger adventure, they can look at our website and research the routes that we recommend, and they can spend the night after making a reservation on one of our floating platforms. We also have designated campsites on some of the few sand beaches that exist on the bigger rivers that thread their way through the Delta. A person could go out there and have a 2-day, 1-night trip, or they could spend a whole week there, 5 nights, going from one place to another, having an adventure in the Delta. But it is one of the wildest places in Alabama.
You might be wondering how a huge hill could spring up here in the middle of a river delta.
Well, this is no ordinary hill. This is evidence that indigenous people once thrived here amongst the bounty of the Delta.
This is the tallest of 18 Mississippian-era Indian mounds, known as the Bottle Creek Indian Mounds. The site has been recognized for its archaeological significance since the 1800s. In 1974, it was honored with a listing on the National Register of Historic Places, and in 1994, it was declared a National Historic Landmark.
To this day, no one can be completely sure about the whole story of why these mounds were built. One thing for sure, though, protecting the Delta protects these magnificent structures for future study.
Preservation has also paid big dividends for the critters that call the Delta home. Back in 1967, the American alligator was one of the very first creatures to be federally listed as endangered. And this was before the Endangered Species Act was passed in 1973.
Like the gator, the critters of the Delta can be stealthy, just out of sight. But if you sit quietly, there's much to discover with your ears. Here in its lower reaches at the top of Mobile Bay, the Delta takes on a dramatically different character. As natural and untamed as the Delta is, it's not out of reach. In fact, you might say it's just down the road a bit.
Five Rivers was Jim Gregg's idea, and all the work that we were doing in the Delta and the fact that people had a hard time getting out and enjoying that resource led to the concept of building this Delta Resource Center. And the department already had the land there on the causeway, and it was right there beside I-10 and a major corridor of movement of people, and we just really thought that it was a great opportunity to showcase the Delta to the people that live there, but also help visitors passing through stop and appreciate what Alabama has to offer.
Here, where wet wildlands meet the bay, Five Rivers, Alabama's Delta Resource Center, is a gateway to adventure.
The new Five Rivers facility in the lower end of Tensaw country is one of the greatest additions that we've had in this area in many years. The fact that we're going to be able to bring young people in there and introduce them to the wonders of the Delta is of great value to the community.
I'm pretty fascinated by it because I learned it in class and I learn more and I get to see it in person in real life. It makes me pretty fascinated. I was shocked.
It's very interesting because you can learn more stuff that you didn't know about on different species. I learned a lot of things about like what kind of animals live in the water and like what animals are endangered and extinct.
It makes it special because a lot of people don't get a chance to experience what we experience.
I saw all kinds of different kinds, all kinds of different animals, and all the animals that I did see, I learned stuff about them.
It was cool. It was cool.
Not only fingers, but your whole arm gonna be gone. You're gonna take it.
This really gives the kids a hands-on opportunity to see some things in nature that we talk about in our science book, but we don't always have the opportunity to come and really actually see it. So they're gonna be excited to look for the red-bellied turtle today, and we're gonna really point out a lot of things that they can find along the marsh, like the different types of animals and the different types of habitats and the plants and animals that live out here in their own environment, in their own ecosystem.
I think a lot of times we test kids on things that they haven't had the opportunity to actually experience. So this field trip is just a perfect time for me to actually take them out and let them actually see nature firsthand. So, you know, as we're talking about food chains, it helps when I can refer back to an actual trip we've taken and remind them of things that we've seen. And it makes all the difference when it comes to motivating kids because our science scores are really off the charts. Our kids are scoring on middle school levels in science. So we're pretty proud of them, and I think a lot of them are motivated now and they see science as fun, not just something boring that they have to read out of a book and answer a lot of questions.
After the students have gone to the field trip, they'll come back to the school and we'll do interviews such as video casts, podcasts. They do some blogging and things like that. I mean, you can just see it on their face. They're excited, you know, they're excited to show what they have learned to other people.
More than 20 years ago, we made our first Discovering Alabama visit to the Mobile-Tensaw Delta. How good it is to be back, and how good it is to know the Delta enjoys protection for the next 20 years and beyond. With all the new opportunities we have available to us for visiting the Delta, we and generations to come can explore, discover. We can come to know the wonderful wildlands that are the Mobile-Tensaw Delta. This magical world of swamps, sloughs and savannas, marshes and hammocks, bogs, bottomlands and bayous. This is a world of recreational abundance, of scientific significance, of educational opportunity, a world of spiritual renewal.
Discovering Alabama is a production of the Alabama Museum of Natural History, the University of Alabama. This program is supported by grants from the Solon and Martha Dixon Foundation, the Alabama Wildlife Federation, working for wildlife since 1935, the Alabama Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, State Lands Division, and Alabama Power, always on.